Hello, pleasure people. We are the Pleasure Program. My name is Holly.
I'm Victoria.
We are two licensed therapists specializing in sex therapy, here to share our knowledge and answer your questions around all things related to a healthy and pleasurable sex life. We are starting a new series here called the Pleasure People series, where we are answering your questions. We have some emails from some of you, comments that have been left on some of our videos. Today we're going to read an email from one of our viewers named Kelly about penile fractures. And we're going to do our best to share our thoughts and answer her question. Kelly said, and just so everybody's aware, Kelly did give us permission to use her first name and to read her email. However, I did make a couple of edits and I did redact like a couple of sentences simply because we had to make it YouTube safe, and YouTube doesn't allow you to just say anything on here. So we did edit a little bit here, but we tried to stick to the original email as much as possible. Hi, Holly and Victoria. I'm a subscriber to the Pleasure Program and look forward to the weekly podcasts. I have, when on top, injured, but not fully fractured, an erect penis. It was a horrific experience with lots of pain and screams from my male partner. Plus, he could not continue that night. Sounds horrible. And
very scary.
Of course, he could not continue that night.
Yeah.
So then I have a low-key worry of doing it again, especially when the guy wants me to ride fast, since this is how I did it. My interest in the topic, I think, comes from what I consider to be near misses during, especially, but not only, penis and vagina sex. I think, I could be wrong, LOL, these near misses are usually the guy's fault. Well, not usually the female partner's fault, due to their preference for generally rough thrusting into the vagina, and also the encouragement for the woman to ride high until it almost pops out, and then to quickly come back down hard onto the erect penis. So she references porn, and what she says, you often see the penis bent, but not to the point of instant fracture, and probably lead to disease later in life. So as a result, I get anxious on top. So I think this may be a big downside of porn for men's health. I can see this being very popular with your viewers. Lots of love, Kelly XO. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sending this email and giving us the opportunity to talk about this, because I think it's important. So there's a couple of things to talk about here. One is penile injuries, penile fractures. We can talk about that and kind of provide some information about how that happens, what it looks like, and what kind of treatment you need to receive should this happen. Also, sort of the impact of pornography is another theme in her email here. So let's talk about both of those. So there's not necessarily a question here, but sort of a situation Kelly is sharing.
And some interesting assumptions, right? Assumptions that, in general, men want, I would describe, I guess, rougher sex in that position, right? And it's generally their fault that this kind of incident is happening. So yeah, I found that interesting too, that it's the guy's fault. You know, it takes, I don't know if I 100% agree with that statement. I think maybe what she's getting at is that it might be more of the male, we're talking about heterosexual partners here, that it might be more of the male's preference to have a rougher kind of experience, or for this, like, the woman to be like really high and then coming down really fast, like, and that idea would come from pornography and the pornography the male's watching. But I think a woman could be watching pornography and see something similar and think, let's give this a try. Or I agree.
You know, the woman's willingly doing, participating in this type of intercourse. So
right.
I think
100%.
that both partners should be mindful and aware. And so...
And accidents happen, right?
Yeah,
so I think blaming maybe can be harmful, because then that person
whether she's feeling like it's her fault or he's feeling like it's his fault, that person could be feeling shame or guilt or embarrassment. So the blaming isn't the most helpful, but it makes sense to maybe try to figure out why it's happening so that we can prevent it, because she's clearly feeling anxious, which makes sense. It sounds like her experience was horrific.
Yes. Yeah, it does sound horrific for both of them, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't mention kind of if this injury led to any sort of medical treatment.
So first, let's talk about penile injury, penile fracture. I want to give a little shout out to Rena Malik. She's a urologist. She has a YouTube channel with lots of really great information, a lot of really great information about this subject too. So feel free to check out her after this if you're looking for additional information.
And we will link her video below in the description box if you want to check it out.
When we think of a fracture, we typically think about somebody breaking a bone, right? They're falling, they're fracturing their leg, something like that. But the penis, it doesn't actually have any bones, but it can still be fractured. So when the penis is erect, it's filled with blood, and there's an outer layer of tissue. And if an erect penis is bent forcefully, the tissue around the outer layer of the penis can rupture.
Signs that this might be happening would be hearing a pop or crack sound, instant loss of an erection, and the penis will become quite swollen and purplish in color if a penile fracture has happened. And of course, severe pain. It's a pretty traumatic situation to be in. In Kelly's case, she said that she injured but did not fully fracture her partner's penis. So, of course, there might be somewhat of a more milder injury that could occur.
Some of the causes of an injury like this is engaging in certain sex positions that increase the chance of the penis slipping out during intercourse. Not only maybe positions, but also the style of intercourse that you're having, such as what Kelly mentioned, right? If you're going
rigorous, intentionally
right,
slipping out and then entering again, then that would be risky, right?
Anything that would cause you to fall or roll over onto an erect penis, that might be something as like slipping in the shower or something like that. So keeping that in mind.
What to do if this happens to you or your partner? So first thing to keep in mind here is that this is a medical emergency. I think that when we think about, breaking a penis or penile fracture, that it's sort of, there's jokes or we see it as like a ha-ha sex injury, how funny. It's actually really serious and requires you to go to the emergency room as soon as possible. And it requires surgery to repair. And the research has shown that the faster you get into surgery, the better your chance of not having any long-term damage and that you have a full recovery without there being any sort of curvature to the penis. While you're in surgery, the doctors will examine the urethra to make sure that there isn't an injury to the urethra as well, so that they would go ahead and repair that if that were the case. If for some reason they're not sure if this was a full fracture or requires surgery, you will get an MRI done to determine the extent of the damage. Advice for how to prevent this injury from occurring. I thought Rena's advice was very simple, very straightforward in her video. She says, communicate with your partner. If the penis slips out, be in control. So it kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but what are your thoughts about that advice?
I think it's great. Yeah. I mean, I think it is important to communicate if that happens. I'm curious why someone wouldn't communicate that happened, right?
Unless it's intentional, right? If you're like trying to have this like all the way out, all the way in kind of experience, but that's a risky.
That is risky.
A risky way of, having intercourse with a partner for this type of injury to potentially occur, because if your partner comes back down and misses and hits an erect penis and causing a forceful bent, any sort of forceful bending to an erect penis is when this happens. So her advice was almost the opposite. Like, tell your partner if like, oop, I'm out. I was just thinking like, how might one communicate that? Would it just be as simple as, oop, slipped out? Or you have a code word like,
saw you, Holly.
Cat's out of the bag. Cat's out of the bag. Something. It made me laugh a little bit, thinking like, okay, what might that communication look like?
Yeah. And people can be really creative, right? Like if you're part of the kink community, we've had videos on the kink community, you're part of this like dom sub dynamic, which is why maybe this is appealing to you, because this can feel really dominant if you're vigorous. Like, I'm sure there are dominating statements that you could come up with that would help keep the mood high if that happens, but allow for communication about it.
Right. So noticing when this happens, noticing that it puts you in a risky situation, and really communicating quickly about it. And, Rena's other advice, be in control. Like, I imagine she means be in control of your body movements, feel like there's a sense of control over the pace, the rhythm that you're moving at, and so that both people don't feel worried or concerned that you're at risk of an injury like this.
Yeah. And I guess transitioning to us talking about pornography, other advice is like maybe considering, just like fantasy, some things are maybe better left in the fantasy world or the pornography world than in actual real reality sex with a partner. If it's maybe too risky or too unsafe, is it worth it? Can you adjust it at all? Does it have to look exactly how you're envisioning it?
Right.
Right.
So let's talk about pornography and sort of this idea of this is where we get some of our ideas about sex and then maybe try them out or implement them with partners, and how maybe pornography, at least in Kelly's mind, is partly or all to blame for this injury happening. So in our
Sorry.
The McDonald's cup out of the frame, Victoria.
No judgment.
The research on the impact pornography has over our sex lives, our behavior, our ideas about sex is a little bit mixed, a little bit complicated. There is no very clear answer, but we're going to go over some of the findings that have been discovered through research.
On one end of the research, they found that most people who consume pornography actually don't perceive any sort of consequences or negativity from consuming porn. They actually perceive it being a beneficial thing because it's helping them expand their sexual repertoire or explore their sexual identity or their sexuality.
One theory or model called the 3AM model is used to explain how pornography might impact our sexual behavior. And so that stands for the acquisition, activation, application model. Basically, what this model is implying is that we gather something called a sexual script from observing pornography. So kind of our whole narrative, our whole idea around what sex is, how it should be done, how one should feel and behave and interact. And we sort of absorb that information and develop sort of like a script within ourselves that we then act out in our own sexual lives. And the two variables that might most allow for you to develop a sexual script from viewing pornography would be the frequency of how often you're viewing pornography, as well as how realistic you're perceiving the pornography to be.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, there is research that have highlighted the potential for negative consequences from pornography consumption. There's been some German studies done, and we'll link them below in case you're interested in reading more, but there is an association between frequency of consumption of pornography and then engaging in dominant activities. We won't get too explicit to be safe for YouTube, but essentially like physical aggression or like verbal abuse kind of thing. And then they've also found that there's a correlation with women's frequency of consumption of porn and their desire for actual submissive sexual behavior. So receiving that kind of physical aggression, verbal abuse that we just talked about.
And we should probably briefly
touch upon here correlation and what that means, because I think media and just, the average lay person hears there's an association or a correlation and thinks the pornography is causing this behavior. And with a correlational study, you cannot make a statement of causation. So we can't say that the pornography caused the aggressive behavior. We can only say there's an association. We're tracking these two things, frequency of consumption and the enactment of these aggressive sexual behaviors, and we're noticing as one goes up, so does the other. But we can't say one caused the other. The only way you can say that is if you were doing a controlled study where you can control all the variables so that you can definitively say this variable did cause this variable because we made sure there was nothing else that could have been part of that change. So a silly example might be like that shark attacks are associated with ice cream sales. And you might think, oh my gosh, if I eat ice cream, I will be attacked by a shark. Oh my God. That would be a mistake, right? Well, in actuality, so we might notice, hey, the higher ice cream sales go up, the higher shark attacks go up. But what's actually accounting for that association is probably the weather. I mean, the more likely you are to go out and have ice cream, the more likely you are to be swimming in the ocean or being at the beach. So it really doesn't mean the ice cream's causing the shark attack. It just means that there's an association between the two. So again, we're not saying pornography caused this. We're just saying there's a link, an association, and there might be another variable to consider that is mediating that connection.
For sure. Or it could be backwards, right? Like people who find more aggressive sex appealing might just happen to be more interested in pornography, not that pornography is causing it.
Right. Good point. Yeah, we can only speculate, right? There's a few other studies here that give us a little bit more information about how pornography might be associated to sexual behavior. There is some research to indicate that there are some people who tend to prefer the sexual acts depicted in pornography. There are some individuals who start to prefer masturbation while viewing pornography versus actually having partnered sex. And there's some research to indicate that pornography consumption is associated with lower levels of satisfaction in a romantic relationship. And there's mixed research on the association between pornography consumption and erectile dysfunction or sexual functioning issues. So some research indicates that there was a finding that there was an association, and others that didn't find any association at all.
And then again, there are people who find pornography consumption to be really beneficial and have a positive impact for them. And there is actual research to back that up, and that indicates that there's a positive impact with self-exploration of sexuality, with discovering new sexual activity, with promoting experimentation with a partner, identifying interest, and just exploring their own bodily sensation. So they may feel it to be true, and research is backing that up. Any final thoughts for Kelly?
Just thank you, Kelly, for sending in your email. We hope that we've been able to kind of explore this situation, penile fracture, and also how pornography might play a role in that situation. Certainly it's possible, right, that viewing pornography that might depict the type of sexual acts that could result in an injury might influence somebody to want to try it, or, it looks exciting, or it looks fun, or it looks really thrilling. And so it's possible, based on some of the research findings, that it might have influenced, it might not. But either way, hopefully we have some useful advice here to keep yourself and your partner safe, so that we're avoiding an injury like this, because it sounds horrible and hugely traumatic. And I hope that, Kelly also talks about feeling anxious that this might happen again. So hopefully some of this information can empower her to make any changes she feels is necessary with her sex life, so that something like this won't happen again.
That's what I was going to say too, is that if you have a negative experience, whether it's sexual or not, if you're going to go do that same experience again, it's very normal to have some nervousness or anxiety. So I would just encourage Kelly to talk about it with her partner. And if she needs to reintroduce to things slowly, that's okay. Just talk about it, take baby steps, see what feels most comfortable.
Yeah. That's it for our first episode of Pleasure People. We hope that you enjoyed this video. We welcome you to send us an email or leave us a comment with your questions, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and share our thoughts. We'll see you in the next one.